Hello, I am Joshua P. Warren, and this is Joshua P. Warren Daily. And you know, it's true that back in the old days, people really did wipe their ass with a corn cob. And that's kind of funny when you reflect on everybody freaking out earlier this year, going to the grocery store or the drugstore or whatever, and not finding toilet paper anywhere. And when you really start thinking back about how people used to live, it is kind of unimaginable to us today. I mean, imagine, if you can, living without air conditioning on a hot summer day, or without electricity for that matter, you know, accessible in your house. So you didn't even have a fan. You had no safe, easy, convenient lighting. I mean, if you wanted light, you had to light something on fire, a candle or whatever. And of course, people had disasters all the time. Houses were burning down, barns were burning down. Imagine life without refrigeration. Or think about going to have a surgery without any type of anesthesia. Oh, you're just going to have to lay there and take this shit, bite on that stick or whatever. It maybe, if you're lucky, you swig some whiskey. Look what they were doing in the Civil War, where they're just sawing people's legs off. Or just transportation, being able to get from A to B without having to go out and hope that your horse is in a good mood, if you're lucky enough to have one. Not to mention getting on an airplane and flying. You see, I could keep going on, but we really take a lot for granted. And it's important for us sometimes to pause and to think about where we came from and how easily we could revert back to that type of a situation if we make poor choices. In fact, I have a list here I'm going to read of the 40 most annoying things in life according to a survey. Now, this was taken last year, so it was before all the madness of 2020, but it really gives you a lot of insight into who we are right now. Any society can partially be judged based upon the things that society prioritizes as being an annoyance or a problem, right? So this is an interesting bit of insight I'm going to share with you. The 40 most annoying things in life. And, of course, Halloween is creeping toward us. And I'm going to read you, I think it's kind of a spooky report that I got from a guy who was being harassed by one of the jinn. You know what I mean? We call them genies. Genies are a very, very strange phenomenon, and I'm going to dig into it a little bit and tell you what this guy says. He saw this thing, and I will tell you how he described this genie appearing when he saw it. It's quite interesting. And I figure that this is also a good time for us to look into our priorities and who we are today and what is out there and what the future may or may not look like, because tonight is going to be the first presidential debate. And of course, I'm broadcasting from Las Vegas, Nevada. I know there are people who listen to this program all over the world, but certainly a big night here. And I have some thoughts that I want to share with you on why I think it's important for us to take this opportunity to think a little bit about what we want our future to look like without getting too much into politics. One thing I'll tell you before I dig into all this, though, is I released my last podcast days ago, and after that, Lauren said, "Hey, you know what, Josh? That was your 500th Joshua P. Warren Daily." I said, "Really?" She said, "Yeah." I don't keep up with that sort of thing. Can you believe that? So I have been hosting radio programs of various kinds for almost 20 years. But I started this podcast, the very first edition of this podcast, Joshua P. Warren Daily, came out on October 1st of 2017. So this week, on Thursday, October 1st of 2020, is going to be 3 years. So in 3 years, I have cranked out Well, this will be over 500 podcasts. So not quite daily, which was my original intention, but not too shabby, huh? About an average of one every couple of days. So I guess I feel very proud of that, but also let me tell you, I don't make these shows for myself. I make them for you. So thank you very much for listening and supporting this program and telling people about it and helping it grow. It's really phenomenal. And I got an email from a listener the other day, and he asked me if there was a way to get all 500 episodes. Well, they're really not episodes; they're editions. You know, I won't get into the difference between edition and episodes, but you know what you might know what I mean. So anyway, but I told him I didn't think there was, and I contacted the Buzzsprout that hosts this podcast, because this podcast is independent, and there was no easy way. We went back and forth. There's no easy way for you to download every single edition of this program. You could do it manually. You could go into every single one and download each one individually, which is going to take some time, but there's no way to just hit a button and download all of them. And the guy said, well, don't you have a copy of all of them? No, I don't. That was part of why I started doing this podcast the way I did in the beginning. I wanted convenience. I would be out on the road. I'd grab my cell phone, I'd call in, I'd leave a podcast and hang up, and that was it. There was no backing up anything, it wasn't any more complex than that. So I do have some of the shows, of course, backed up. But hey, if you're a person who's a real fan of this show and you want to archive it, then put the time in. Go through it. Right now is a good time to start. You have 500 shows. You just click through there and you download each one of them. And then when you do that, you can send them all to me, and we'll lock them away in a nuclear apocalypse-proof bunker somewhere in Antarctica, because I'm sure they are that valuable to humankind. But no, seriously, thank you all very, very much. And I just had another phone call last night with the marketing team for the new podcast, and they're telling me that now they are expecting it to be released, or to launch, I should say, sometime before the end of October. So this process is slower than I thought it was going to be, but that's okay, because that means I'll just keep on cranking out Joshua P. Warren Dailies until the new podcast launches. So yeah, you guys are just fantastic to support an independent podcast like this. And no matter what you do in the podcast world, there's nothing quite as pure as just grabbing a microphone and being able to talk and not worrying about anything other than just talking and hitting the upload button. So anyway, let's get back to the content now. So like I said, tonight is the presidential debate, and I do not make my opinions about political matters explicitly known. And the reason is you get enough of that all the time through other media from people who study it every day and are better informed. But here's what I will tell you. I have been registered as an independent my entire life, and I have voted for people of just about every party that you can imagine over the years. And so I've never been, strictly like, I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat or I'm a libertarian or whatever. I mean, I'm always sort of judging things on a case-per-case basis, because I find also that these parties, they change a lot over time. A certain party 10 years ago is not the same party today. And so I want to give you one important thing to think about that I think transcends party politics. And trust me, I have very, very strong opinions on what's happening right now in the world. And you can probably glean a lot of that from listening to this show without me coming right out and saying, well, I think you should vote for this person or that person. Here is something that's really, really important enough for me to share with you on this crucial day when this presidential debate is about to happen. If you are a Democrat and again, I'm gearing this toward people who are listening here in the USA. If you're a Democrat and you just cannot stand the Republicans and you say, let's do whatever it takes to get those Republicans, or if you're a Republican and you can't stand the Democrats and you say, all right, let's do whatever it takes to get the Democrats, just remember that eventually the shoe is going to be on the other foot. That whatever laws are bent by one party will also, therefore, set a precedent for the other party to bend those rules in the future. It goes both ways. And that is why that instead of being so solely distracted by party politics, you should first and foremost be concerned about the common good of the people based upon having a system of input by the people. And whoever wins in this election, I really, really hope will correct or try to help make a correction here that I believe definitely needs to be made after this year. And let me tell you exactly what I'm talking about. This year has been so important and eye-opening because what we have seen is the incredible power that can be wielded by politicians at a local level if the politician declares a state of emergency. And look, and if you look at this whole country, Republicans and Democrats, you have across the spectrum, you have governors who have declared different various stages of emergency. And what that means is, now I'm talking about local politicians in general, but especially governors. If a governor, we have found, and this is kind of scary because I think a lot of governors have had a aha moment, like, wow, look, I can do this. And if a governor of a state in particular says, this is going to be an emergency situation, and it is indefinite, if a governor declares an indefinite state of emergency, then that governor can take on absolute power to make whatever laws he or she sees fit until that governor decides the state of emergency is over. That is the exact opposite of how our government is supposed to function. The purpose of our government is that our government is supposed to be based upon the consent of the governed, ultimately. And that doesn't mean that you vote for somebody and then that person gets in office day number 2 and says, state of emergency. And for the next 4 years, this person becomes the dictator and gets to just write laws out. And who needs the legislative branch, right? Yeah. Oh, it's an emergency. You have to do whatever I say indefinitely until that is the antithesis of what this country is supposed to be about. So what I feel should be done is, I'm not sure how this would work out on paper, but I hope that seeing what happened this year, it has at least opened our eyes to how this could be severely abused. And now that people understand this, it's a matter of time before it will be. And so we need some type of a provision, maybe even an amendment to the Constitution that basically says, if you're going to be part of a state, if in the United States, that no matter what your role is, if you're going to declare a state of emergency, then you can only do that for a limited period of time. Let's say, a week to maybe at the most 30 days. And then at that point, there should be a truly democratic election where the people come in and then they cast a vote on whether or not, according to them, this state of emergency is warranted. because right now there's no oversight. Again, especially for a governor of whatever party to step in and say, state of emergency, now I'm the king. And shut down whatever he or she wants to, or be as arbitrary as he or she wants to. So look, this is an important enough issue for me to bring it up here on one of my last Joshua P. Warren dailies before I transition into this new podcast, because here I can speak with 100% freedom, and it's going to be a little more difficult to do that on my new podcast because, you know, there are certain restrictions on how this thing's going to be marketed and distributed and all that. So I want to hammer this home to anybody listening out there who has a voice, who has some influence on how government and law is construed. It's very, very important for us to immediately, once this chaotic transition is over with, take whatever measures are necessary to ensure that we do not replace this system that we have where the government is based upon the consent of the governed with a system of individual tyrants that are strewn all over the place. That is, I don't care what party you support, none of us want that. Okay? Nobody wants that. We want freedom. So, there's my soapbox for you. And it's a good time, again, for us to sort of look back and, like, don't forget, folks, there was a time when we had kings and queens and tyrants and dictators running most of the world. And we've done amazingly well moving away from that. But there's no reason that we can't slip right back into it. So you see, there is context for me bringing up thinking about where we are in the world right now versus where we have been in the past, and looking at the relationship, which is why I think, to make this more realistic, it's fascinating to think about some of the things that people experienced when they lived, I don't know, in the 1800s or whatever, what some of their hardships were versus some of the stuff that we're living with right now. So here's some content that I thought was kind of thought-provoking, so perhaps you'll enjoy it as well. I found this one article at a publication called Countryside. The website is iamcountryside.com. And it was written by Kathy Belt. And it's called A Glimpse at Simple Homesteading Life in the 1800s. So here are just some little things that she is pointing out as a historian, writer. And she says, obviously, you can't really be that general because it was different if you're the president living in the 1800s or somebody like that, or somebody living in rural Tennessee or something. But so let's just say, okay, so she's talking about like maybe the average person at that time in the 1800s that was sort of just out in the country kind of making it on his or her own. So I'll read just some of this stuff. It says, in the 1800s, you would be, let's see. If you truly want to try life in the 1800s, be expected to have 18 to 20 children, all born at home, and have half of them die before the age of 5 because of dysentery, typhoid, scarlet fever, or measles. That's something that my buddy Vance Pollock, who is also an historian, has talked about a lot, is that people don't realize just how incredibly common it was for little kids to die, and that's one of the reasons that people had these giant families. They were just hoping that maybe a certain percentage of them would make it. She goes on to say, be prepared to get up with the sun and read by the light of your drafty fireplace. She says, yes, the Franklin stove was invented in the late 1700s, but it weighed so much Most folks who went west didn't take it with them. And if you stayed in one of the big cities, you would have access to well oil or kerosene for your lights. She says here, be prepared to slaughter pigs and use everything except the oink. And you had better spend all day Sunday at church. Says here, hygiene, well, it didn't really exist. There was usually a pan with water in it that you carried from the well in a bucket for rinsing your fingers before meals and washing your face in the morning. Everyone washed in the same basin of water. There was one bathtub full of water that everyone used for their Saturday night baths. Then she goes on to say, and ladies, would you like to know the origin of the phrase on the rag? I'm not going to go any further with that one. She said babies wore cloth diapers, and the diapers had to be boiled before hung on the line to dry, yes, even in the winter. You'd hang them out so they froze, take them down and snap them so the water crystals would fly out, and then bring them in and hang them from rope you strung from one end of the house to the other. Clothes for the rest of the family? Well, one dress for Mama for church and one dress for the rest of the week. One pair of pants and a shirt for Papa for church and one outfit for him for the rest of the week. The rest of the people had hand-me-downs. Clothes were remade and remade and remade until they ended up in the rag bag. See here. Says you'd better like being pecked by chickens. Treating thrush on your horse's feet with iodine. There wasn't much access to antibiotics and things. Trimming the hooves of everything that walks. Roosters need their spurs clipped. Dogs need their claws shortened. And so do cows, goats, horses, sheep, and just about anything except a fish. Don't forget you should not drink water that's downriver from where the animals drink. And if you want your animals to work for you, they need to be fed before you are. So you'd better have good neighbors to swap seed and various things with. Horses kick and bite. Bulls can gore you. A pig will eat you. A rooster's spurs are sharp. Hope you know how to sew up cuts. She goes on to say, if you're living like a pioneer, expect a drafty cold house with snow on the bed, no glass in the windows, and 2 rooms. One room is the bedroom. The other is for all other functions, including mending the harness, sharpening and oiling your tools, spinning and weaving, cooking and relaxing in the evening. Oh boy. You know, it just goes on and on. How the beds, you know, like everybody's piled up in the same bed. Using buffalo dung for fuel. I mean, you know, it is pretty interesting to think about. Like she says here, before the American Civil War, there were no left and right shoes. Or rather, they weren't made that way. But after wearing them often enough, they developed left and right. See, these are things that you don't think about most of the time. You know, we get into disease here. I mean, my God. Kill you, cripple you, polio, measles, mumps, chickenpox, smallpox, influenza, diphtheria, tetanus, typhoid, whooping cough, trench mouth, milk fever, goiters, warts, worms. And then you have all the little problems that we still face, like arthritis, heart attacks, diabetes. Says the average lifespan for many people in the 1800s was 35. If you survived childhood, you had a good chance of living to be 60 or even 70. By that time, you were so worn out by all the work, you were just ready to go. By the time you were 40, your skin was very wrinkled, you'd lost most of your teeth, and every joint hurt all the time. I mean, Think about it, really. Look at the people in the old black and white photographs. They all have this look on their faces like, please take me now. This fucking sucks. Don't they have that look? Well, anyway, here's a survey that was done last year and published in a UK paper called lincolnshirelive.co.uk, Lincolnshire Live. It says back in the Middle Ages, people's biggest concern was just staying alive. Plague, famine, feudal barons burning your house down. All these things were very real things to worry about. But now we fast forward to today. A survey was given to ask people what their biggest annoyances are. Here are the 40 modern inconveniences. There may be a slight UK twist on this. But here we go. I'm going to read all 40 to you. Number 1 is intermittent Wi-Fi connection. Number 2 is calls from unknown numbers. 3, forgetting passwords. 4, running out of phone battery. 5, late trains or buses. 6, paying extra luggage. Paying for. Let me try that again. Paying extra for luggage on a flight. Number 7, when your computer needs to update seemingly every morning. 8, not being able to find the end of the sticky tape. 9, running out of mobile phone data. 10, not having enough leg room on a journey. 11, advertisements with no skip button on YouTube videos. 12, videos you're watching via a streaming service, such as on Netflix, that are buffering. 13, when you crack your mobile phone screen. 14 is autocorrect on your phone. 15, when your phone runs out of space. 16, bars or shops that no longer accept cash payments. 17, websites with no email address. 18, not being able to fast forward live TV. 19, no space on the tube, which they're talking about the subway. There's your English influence. Number 20 is tangled earphones. So now we're halfway through the list. And you know what? You and I, we can look at most of those and be like, hell yeah, that is some annoying shit. I'm not here to try to lecture you and say that how dare you live in the year 2020. No, I'm just saying, like, it's true. You all those things pretty much sound annoying, don't they? But it shows you something about who you are, and maybe you haven't thought about yourself this way in a while, or maybe ever. But let's continue. 21, mobile phone updates. 22, your takeaway, I guess, again, must be English thing. Like it says here, your takeaway taking more than 30 minutes to arrive. So, see here in this country, we don't say a takeaway. We would just say your ride. I guess that's what we're talking about here. Like your ride is taking more than 30 minutes to arrive. Number 23, getting the wrong order with your supermarket online shop. Number 24 is average speed cameras. 25, someone already taking the username you want for a social media account. 26, apps that almost, but not quite, do what you need. 27, people who call you when you ask for a text, or vice versa. That is annoying, isn't it? Yeah, fuck those people. 28, when you straighten your hair and it rains. 29, answer phone messages. That is also annoying. It really is. Number 30, having a dietary requirement like being gluten-free or vegan. Number 31, when the air conditioning takes too long to cool or heat your car. Too long. 32, not being able to pay at pump when you're in a rush. 33, forgetting to charge your wireless headphones. 34, never knowing if you can trust your car reversing sensors. 35, people who don't pick up to withheld numbers. So we would say people who don't answer a private number. 36, living outside the delivery radius of the nearest Chinese restaurant. 37 is getting photo prints which don't fit in the frame. 38 is switching from iOS to Android or vice versa. 39 is when you cancel your Spotify premium so you have to sit through advertisements. And number 40, number 40, your story not uploading to Instagram or Facebook. Now again, I'm not saying I'm holier than thou, that I am not in the same realm where I'm also taking for granted a lot of the things that we have and being all whiny and moody about it. But I am saying, look, once in a while, we need to take the moment that hopefully you're taking right now to sort of put things in perspective and really think about where you came from and realize that it is possible for us to move backward. And moving backward or moving forward, but especially moving backward, starts with your government. And I think that it is, I tell you one thing I think's annoying when you have all these celebrities, these actors and singers and stuff who are all standing up like, I'm an activist now. Listen to me. Look at my muscles. Look at me in a bikini. Take my opinion. Look, that is annoying. But we all, as just regular citizens, need to think realistically about the fact that whatever happens with the government affects all of us. Okay, it affects every industry, and you don't have to get out there and air all your opinions and dirty laundry and use this as some, excuse for people to look at you and pay attention to me, and exploit political situations for your own recognition and all this kind of crap that celebrities do all the time. But it is important for me to realize, for example, that, hey, as a person who wants to continue enjoying freedom, free speech, for example, which, without free speech, I can't do this show. I can't do any show, really. If you don't have that kind of right guaranteed, then, everything else that we enjoy is it just dissolves. It's for naught. And that is why it's important to, at very least, realize that it doesn't matter how all these elections and stuff turn out if we end up installing tyrants and dictators and despots again. So can't we at least agree on that? Can't we all come together on that? So we'll see. We'll see what happens. The 40 most annoying things in life. That was really interesting, wasn't it? Lincolnshire Live. That's lincolnshirelive.co.uk. appreciate them putting that together for us. And Paul Whitelum is the guy who apparently put that together. And like I say, that was last year. So I wonder how that list would change after what we have experienced this year here in 2020. One thing that I debated as to whether or not to share this with you, because I started thinking about annoying things, and somehow, my mind went down this wormhole, and then I started thinking about stuff that people do to counteract what annoys them, and then that led me to thinking about pranks and stuff like that, because I was raised up in a family of pranksters. And prank is a very, very nice word for some of the things that my family used to do to each other. And I learned from especially my mom, who is a first-class prankster, how to coordinate some extremely elaborate pranks, which I proceeded to do primarily in my high school years, things that I would never do today. But, we're so well coordinated that I basically created a little TV show. I could have done a candid camera TV show if you, but when you're a kid, sometimes you don't really think about how, I don't know, how messed up it could be for the person who you're pranking. What their experience is like. So I don't prank people anymore, but you don't ever want to mess with me, I can tell you that, because if I decide to start pranking again, you are not going to want to be the subject of one of my pranks. I will spend 6 months planning and organizing this prank. And I got this rare book the other day. It's called The Amazing Jonathan's Every Trick in the Book. Now, you know The Amazing Jonathan, right? He is just a fantastic talent. He's in his 60s. And he is a magician / comedian who he's kind of dark and twisted, and he does all these kind of wicked tricks. And if you've never seen The Amazing Jonathan, just go to YouTube and do a search for Amazing Jonathan and watch some of his acts, and you'll see he does a lot of gory stuff. Everybody's so sensitive now that I don't know if his acts would work well anymore. He's kind of retired now, because my understanding is he has the record as being like the longest running solo magician act in Las Vegas. He doesn't live in Vegas anymore, at least maybe he does, but he doesn't perform much anymore. He started having some medical problems several years ago, and so I don't know if he still performs at all anymore, but I'd love to meet the guy, and have always just really enjoyed his work. And so I was able to attain a book autographed by him, actually, called Every Trick in the Book by Amazing Jonathan. And I started reading it, and I thought maybe I should read some of these pranks and stuff on my podcast. And then I thought, well, maybe not. Maybe I don't want to give people ideas, but I don't know. In the foreword of this, he says, I would say I am qualified to write a book about few topics. The few topics that I am qualified to write about are illegal or just not interesting enough to the average person. That leaves one topic, practical jokes. I am overqualified to write this book. And he underlines the word overqualified. So I went through, and there's some stuff in this book I just will not read to you on the air. But I got kind of a guilty pleasure out of chuckling at some of this stuff, so I figured, you know what? What the hell? I'm going to share this with some of the, with the people in my audience. And I am not in any way endorsing this stuff. Okay? I'm just going to share it with you as a chuckle. Again, this is Amazing Jonathan's book. So this is this is one of those that's really terrible, but you could almost imagine yourself doing it because it just doesn't. It wouldn't make you feel like that bad of a person. He writes, I played this gag on my cousin, and unfortunately he plays it right back at me, and neither of us has been able to enjoy a movie or a book ever since. Find your victim's book that he or she happens to be reading at the time. Read the last chapter and find the gist of the story. Find out who dies, who lives, etc. Now write that information on one of the pages in the middle of the book. If you don't want to ruin a good book, write it on a piece of paper and put it in the center of the book. Now when he gets to the middle, he will read the paper, and as they say, end of story. You have ruined the ending for him and wasted about a week of his life, depending on how fast he can read. If you can't get access to his book, read the ending in a bookstore and leave it on his answering machine. This book was written a while back. If he hangs up when he hears what you're doing, then code the ending in a regular sounding message. So for example, hey Jim, how you doing? You know that restaurant we ate at last week? Well, remember that shark I ate? That same shark eats the captain of the boat, and the two survive to blow up the shark at the end. Now that's how your book Jaws ends. Then you've ruined the book. He says, remember, this also works on movies. Why am I telling you guys this? Jeez. Okay, I'm not going to read anymore. I'm afraid I'm going to inspire people to do nasty things like that. Well, okay, you want to hear one more? Okay, I'll read one more to you. Okay, listen to this. He says, here's an easy one I've been doing since I was a little amazing. I guess he's saying, now he's big amazing, but anyway. Whenever anyone has a dish of ice cream or a plate of mashed potatoes, I put my hand over the top and say, wow, that's really hot or cold. Feel this. Then they place their unsuspecting hand over the top of the dish to feel the temperature, and that's when I push their hand down into the mess. It's great fun. It works with about anything that's on a plate. Birthday cake is a beauty of a mess to wipe off your hand. You can then do what I call the double bonus. I tell the victim that the reason it's so funny he has it on his hand is because the food smells spoiled. When he raises his hand up to his face to smell the substance, wham! Double bonus. I push his hand into his face. Not real hard, though, because you could hurt somebody. You don't want that. It's humiliating enough for them to have stuff all over their face and hands. Another variation which I do on this is when someone is eating an ice cream cone or has a cup of ice cream, I tell him that I can smell his ice cream from where I'm sitting. I tell him it smells weird and must be spoiled. He always lifts it to his nose to smell. And wham! A push! He's white-faced with ice cream. And I wonder why I have no friends. You gotta admit, that's just some stupid, silly, simple shit that you know will work every time, right? Well, I'm not going to read any more from this book, but you know what? Would you like to hear at least just one more thing? Now, I'm only going to read this because this is just really weird, and I don't even know if this would work. So I'm hoping that somebody out there listening to this show is going to try this out, and you let me know if this actually works. It's called the Invisible Man Trick. You know, I still haven't seen that movie, The Invisible Man, that came out recently. You know, the new version, but I heard it's really good. Listen to this. This is a nifty little gag where it looks just like an invisible man is following you. How can you see anything if he's invisible? Because there's a visible pair of shoes that follow each of your steps about 5 feet behind you. No body, just shoes. When you start walking, the shoes follow you. When you stop, they stop. How is this accomplished? With fishing line and an extra pair of shoes. Simply tie both shoes to the backs of your own shoes, leaving a distance of about 4 to 5 feet between the two. Make sure you tie the line as close to the front of the other shoes as you can. Now, each time you take a step, slide your foot smoothly forward without lifting it, and the other shoe follows step behind you. It's the same with the other foot. Continue walking and watch people's faces as they see the invisible man walking behind you. Here's a tip. If you're walking on carpeting, the shoes slide better. It looks much smoother. And you know what? I read that and I got online to see if I could find video of somebody doing this, and I couldn't. So if you find video of somebody doing this, send it to me. Or if you do it, send it to me. Just go to joshuapwarren.com, joshuapwarren.com, and you'll find my email address there on the homepage. Or you can tweet it to me at Joshua P. Warren, at Joshua P. Warren. And I would like to see that effect pulled off. Anyway, why did I share that with you? It's just random stuff. But it kind of fits in a little bit if you stretch your mind. You bend it a bit out of proportion. Thanks to the amazing Jonathan. And again, it's called Every Trick in the Book. I'm very happy to have an autographed copy of that. You know, I actually am not one of these people who tries to collect a huge library. I used to have a gigantic library, and I moved so much that I finally gave away or sold or, sadly enough, even trashed a lot of it. So I'm very particular about what books that I keep with me these days. And it's interesting, though, because the world is just overrun with books, and yet sometimes it's getting harder and harder to find a certain book that you want. It's almost like if it's not a Kindle now, or it's not something you can download as an ebook, if you go and you try to find a physical book, if you can find it, it might cost you an arm and a leg and take forever to get shipped to you. And so, you know, people are encountering a lot of issues with getting some books that you think you'd have easy access to. So that's a cool one to have. Like I say, don't ever piss me off. Never piss off a guy with a wishing machine. I should put that on a t-shirt, or that should be some kind of a slogan, shouldn't it? Never piss off a guy with a wishing machine. Which actually brings me to what I want to share with you next. I got an email from a guy who got a wishing machine, and he's been using radionics to solve a problem that he's been having with a djinn. Now, what is a djinn? First off, let me read the definition, well, more of a description really, from Wikipedia. Simplest thing to do, djinn. In this case, it's spelled J-I-N-N. This gentleman spelled it D-J-I-N-N. There are different ways of spelling this. But it says jinn, also anglicized as genies, are supernatural creatures in early pre-Islamic Arabian, and later Islamic mythology and theology. Jinn are neither innately evil nor innately good. It says, Islam acknowledged spirits from other religions and was able to adapt spirits from other religions during its expansion. Jinn are not a strictly Islamic concept. They may represent several pagan beliefs integrated into Islam. In an Islamic context, the term jinn is used for both a collective designation for any supernatural creature and also referred to a specific type of supernatural creature. Therefore, jinn are often mentioned together with devils, demons. Both devils and jinn feature in folklore and are held responsible for misfortune, possession, and diseases. However, the jinn are sometimes supportive and benevolent. They are mentioned frequently in magical works throughout the Islamic world to be summoned and bound to a sorcerer, but also in zoological treatises as animals with a subtle body. All right, I'm not sure what the hell that means, but okay, here's why I bring this up. You know, I get tons of emails, and I try to read them all. It's getting harder and harder to even do that. But I try, and I respond whenever I can, but don't ever send me an email and be offended because I can't reply to it. So I've had a series of emails, though, with this guy, and he said, I'm not going to use his name, obviously, like this is some really personal stuff, but I'll read some portions of his email. His emails. His first one said, if you ever need a good subject on the topic of jinn magic, it is me. I was hit by this stuff as a young man when I was married to an Iranian woman. They implanted me through food. So apparently what I'm gathering here is there are certain foods they believe that you could eat that will, I guess, possess you with a jinn. In a nutshell, she and her family almost killed me, and it took extensive interventions to somewhat clear me of this chaos. The damage they have inflicted is extensive. I have been fighting this for over 2 decades. I have been full circle. Priests, light workers, shamans, a voodooist, Hindu pundits, Welts radionics, psionics, etc. I am intimately familiar with the effects of this filth. Talking about the jinn. The damage to my health appears irreversible, and I am still plagued by periods of bizarre negativity, especially over new moon and full moon periods. He says, it appears they used ghoul jinns. That's spelled G-H-U-L in this case. It appears they use ghoul jinns, which are particularly nasty and are found by magicians in refuse, latrines, etc. I always wanted to write a book about my experience to help others who are afflicted by this garbage. I also believe the subject is timely, given the tensions in the world right now. And so then here's what he wrote in another email that I'm going to share with you. He said that he's been using radionics successfully to help get rid of this thing. He said, I saw one as it was coming at me while I was asleep on the living room couch and listening to a meditation tape. I suppose something in me sensed it and started screaming with my eyes still closed. As I opened my eyes, I saw, now here's where he describes what this jinn supposedly looks like. Okay, you ready? He says, as I opened my eyes, before I read this, we've all seen the movie Aladdin, right? So you think of a genie and you think of something like that, right? But again, that is just a particular caricature. Here's what he says this thing he calls a jinn actually looks like. I opened my eyes. I saw a brownish, grayish cloud moving in a linear fashion along the ceiling. This cloud, or blob, was scintillating somewhat and had no distinguishable form or appendages per se. The entity was evidently aware because it stopped at its advance when I realized, it stopped its advance when it realized that I was seeing it, and very nonchalantly reversed course along the ceiling to the bedroom where my ex was conducting rituals under the guise of her doing prayers. He said it was bigger than a basketball. This was apparently a ghoul jinn. I was totally naive at the time, and it took many years to realize and accept what I was dealing with. I think we managed to eradicate the vermin, and my ex-wife is one ghoul jinn short in her inventory of horrors. Every time I did an intervention here, she would drive up, slam the brakes, and begin honking wildly in the middle of the street. In other words, she knew we were messing with her jinns. Isn't that weird? That's a weird story, isn't it? To get something like that from an honest person who's saying, like, here's what happened to me. Now, whether or not you believe it, who knows? But this is a guy who's saying, here's what happened to me. It's quite remarkable. And like so many things, if it's just a cloudy form, well, that could be a ghost. Like if you saw that, you might say, well, this is a ghost. Somebody who's afraid of demons might, that's a demon. It reminds me of, the analogy. You've heard me talk about it before. Jim Mars used to talk about it. Let's say there's people having a party and a little green man runs through the room and one person goes, oh, look, it's an alien. Another person goes, oh, look, it's a leprechaun. You bring your background to your interpretation of what these things are. So, in this particular case, however, coming from that culture, he has this context to say, when I've seen this dark, cloudy thing, this is what they're calling a jinn. A negative thing in this particular context. I've talked more extensively about the concept of the jinn in the past, and so I'm not going to dig any more deeply into it on this particular podcast. But hey, if you think you've had some experiences, feel free to let me know. It is an interesting subject. I truly believe that, there are different types of cultural angles and handles on these spiritual things that we have to deal with from time to time. Well, my friends, I think it's time for me to wrap up this particular edition of the podcast. Before I do that, though, I just want to tell you once again, it's important. It's important for you to keep up with me through my e-newsletter, because I'll get the word any day of the official launch date for the new podcast. And at that point, I'm going to have to tell you where to go to listen to the new podcast, what its name is going to be, and I'll give you the whole story on that. So you have to go to joshuapwarren.com and sign up for the free e-newsletter there. It takes you about 2 seconds. And if you haven't done that, you will instantly receive a free digital good luck charm. Plus, very soon, I'm going to be sending you a special page that I produced regarding a new object you can make at home that will open your eyes. This is a fun little thing I've been wanting to do for a while. I also have a brand new product, as you know, that I'm going to be telling you about, probably within the next week or so, I would imagine. So you want to get the first info on that. I have a new book that should be out in October. There's a lot going on. So while you're at joshuapwarren.com, sign up for that. Check out the Curiosity Shop. See things there you won't find anywhere else in the world. If you're in the Asheville, North Carolina area, you have to take my Haunted Asheville Ghost Tour. Go to hauntedasheville.com, hauntedasheville.com, and read all about the tour options there. But while you're at my personal website, joshuapwarren.com, go ahead and click on the link to this podcast called Joshua P. Warren Daily. And, tell all your friends and loved ones about it. Hook them on this. Help, bring them into the family of Jedis. Let's continue this journey together. We're all transitioning, and we're going into a really exciting new place. It's all free content. And isn't that wonderful? So click the link to this podcast, and you can subscribe through various means. And even though I'm going to be creating a new podcast here any day, you should still keep your subscription to this podcast, because I'll still be using this forum from time to time for bonus material and stuff like that. So click the link to this podcast, Joshua P. Warren Daily. You can either subscribe in all these different ways and different platforms, or just follow me on Twitter at Joshua P. Warren, at Joshua P. Warren. I hope you'll do that anyway. And I usually tweet when a new one is available. So that is it for this particular podcast. Oh, man, I have so much good stuff to share with you for October of 2020. It's going to be insane. So thank you for listening. Thank you for your interest and support. Thank you for staying curious. And I will talk to you again soon.